and welcome everyone to our talk about agility at scale strategies to address hybrid portfolios and increase transparency in your enterprise. That is a mouthful, a lot of words, and what we're hoping to do here is kind of, as maybe you saw in some of the marketing things, we're trying to get out of the buzzwords and really try to give you some practical things that we can talk about in order to address this idea of having hybrid portfolios and really helping us to achieve business agility. As Julia mentioned, my name is Joe Vergara. I am an SPCT with Agile and VP of Transformation and Technology, and I'm here with a couple friends and colleagues. I'm gonna allow Jim Fowler to introduce himself as well.
Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Jim Fowler. I'm a strategic advisor in SPCT here at Scaled Agile. So my role is to work with our closest partners and customers and just helping to dive deep into the framework, answer some of the more advanced questions, and do fun webinars like this where we get to share information and hopefully provide you with some valuable knowledge.
So thanks, Jim. And our friend Mark Debian from Apptio, senior consultant at Apptio. Why don't you give a little introduction to yourself as well?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm Mark Debian. I'm with Apptio, which is now an IBM company, and we work with organizations at all sizes looking to scale and address some of these hybrid challenges. So, happy to be here today and to join in this discussion with these two other distinguished speakers.
And as we get started here in our talk, we really kind of want to start with this idea of what's business agility. And Jim's going to give us kind of the safe answer. We got a safe expert here. He's going to give us the answer from a safe perspective as we think about agility at scale. We're going to get that directly from kind of the leading framework in scaling agility. When I think of business agility, I often think about how can organizations, the ability for organizations to pivot from a strategy perspective. That's kind of my simple definition. Mark, what's your, like, when you think about business agility, like, what do you think about in this realm?
Yeah, Joe. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's three things. One is it's having a plan and just understanding what your strategy is. Because if you don't know what your plan is and where you're going, it's going to be difficult to know, how agile you're being. It is having visibility into that strategy and being able to see where that is and be able to understand within your organization kind of how are you doing within that plan. And then it's also just being able to adjust. Everything changes. When I was a Scrum Master, I loved doing the planning. I loved doing the retrospectives, but I didn't love day one or day two right after the sprint planning because I knew that things were going to change. and as soon as I realized, as soon as I got my team and myself realizing that we can just know that things are going to change, that was a big step for me. So for me, it's about understanding where those changes are and then being able to see where they are.
Good. I love it. So at least Mark and I's definition kind of revolving this around this idea of things just are ever changing, right? We need to have the ability to pivot against that. Jim, why don't you give us like the formal definition? We gave our kind of our informal personal definitions. What does SAFE really have to say about this?
Yeah, absolutely. You both are right on the right track. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Business agility really is all about that ability to rapidly pivot based off of the market changes and conditions within the market. So understanding in this age of digital of which we're in right now, things do change super rapid, far faster than they used to in the past. And so where what I call traditional agile was really kind of, focused at the team level, just kind of technical agility and being able to respond to micro changes in the requirements, that they were fulfilling. In today's day and age, it's the whole market that can just pivot and change on a dime. And it's crazy how fast things change. And so scaling up that ability to that business level to where we're constantly listening to the market, we're constantly sensing what are those opportunities that are out there, and being able to adjust our strategy, being able to adjust our execution instead of taking, months to years to make those adjustments. bringing that down to where as a business, we can very quickly adjust within weeks or just, a couple months, going through that whole process of sensing that change, finding out what is the MVP that we can actually execute that's going to help us answer the question, are we right in our hypothesis of where we want to go? And then being able to pivot quickly when we see that either, yes, we're right, continue to go, or no, we're not right, we need to try something else. So that's really the essence of business agility there, being able to sense those opportunities all the way through taking advantage of and leveraging our opportunity as a business within the market. In order to do this, we go to the next slide, we see in the framework, there's, 7 core competencies that we've identified within the framework that organizations must master in order to really truly be able to achieve true business agility. It requires our ability to have our enterprise solution delivery, understand these larger systems and solutions that have to come together towards delivering that value. Having competency within agile product delivery. So this is kind of where some of the traditional types of agile that we think about, with the focus on customer centricity, the focus on DevOps and all of that in that agile product delivery, and then combining that with the team and technical agility around agile teams, cross-functional teams, built-in quality, really baking that in. All has to come together with the other core competencies around lean agile leadership, having the foundation where leaders understanding that we do need to change even how we do leadership within the organization, how we lead the organizations, how we think about the long-term roadmaps, and all of that really starts with the leaders and being able to support that. And in order to do that, we need to build a continuous learning culture. So building within the organization that constant learning journey, that the leaders are constantly learning, the teams are constantly learning. As an organization, we're learning together, innovating, ideating, testing out ideas. That has to be mastered in order to be able to take advantage and be a true agile business within the marketplace. Excuse me. So the last 2 competencies around organizational agility, that ability to be able to rapidly adjust strategy, to be able to make adjustments to the structure of our organization to meet those business opportunities and the shifts in strategy. If we can't be flexible quickly there, it's going to inhibit us to actually be agile as a business. And then finally, looking at lean portfolio management. And this is one area that we're going to zero in on today, really, and focus in how do we change and adjust and really master the ability to have lean agile budgets within the organization. Look at the lean governance and some of the agile portfolio operations that need to take place to help us be truly agile within the market space. So if we go to the next slide. So really, what we're talking about here is the ability to take that enterprise strategy and understand that it's not a one-way thing. It's not where we're just thinking, ideating with our top level leaders at the enterprise level, making these big, long, multi-year plans that we execute against and being rigid within that. Instead, we need to shift to where the enterprise strategy is a bi-directional process that is a continuous evolution of that strategy, where we have the ideas, we're sensing the market, we're looking for those opportunities to take advantage of, formulating our strategic themes, having that influence our budgets within our portfolios, but then connecting that to the execution of the portfolio, connecting that to the measures of value, our OKRs, our KPIs, having the data that is coming back, consistently with the execution of the portfolio, that then is feeding back to the enterprise saying, hey, here's where we thought there was going to be value. Here's the actual measures we're seeing. Here's the new opportunities we're seeing in the market. being able to feed that back to then re-influence, readjust that strategy and those budgets, and having that continuous bi-directional cycle within our enterprises and our systems.
Yeah, I love how you kind of spoke to that there, Jim. This idea that I love the analogy that you gave in the beginning, where when we're looking to have team agility and make changes at that team level, like Mark was alluding to in the beginning, right? Day 2 of the iteration. That's a struggle, but like it's manageable, right? We can get a small team of people to move. But as we start to think about getting an organization to change its overarching strategy, you think about, you know, when COVID hit several years ago, and many organizations kind of changing their strategy or changing the way they go through execution, or name your the strategy shift in your own organization. That's a much bigger involved change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we kind of want to hear from each of you guys who are participating as we continue along in this discussion and thinking about addressing this portfolio challenges, helping to increase business agility. We'd love to understand, what portfolio challenges are you experiencing, right? What portfolio challenges are impeding business agility within your own organization? So at this point, you guys can see a QR code and some other ways to utilize to fill out this poll in Mentimeter. You can go to menti.com and use that code that is on the screen, or you can scan that QR code, and you'll be able to kind of answer this question. We'd love for you guys to submit your responses, a couple words about what portfolio challenges are impeding business agility. So with that, Julia, hopefully you're able to present that there. And we're going to give you guys a couple minutes, or maybe a minute or so, to fill that out. And I'm going to maybe stop sharing so that Julia can share her screen on the results. Appreciate the early responses. You guys can see some of the live responses that are coming in. You're seeing budgets and dependencies, funding, labor, visibility, with this idea of inertia, right? That things are already moving, right? What other challenges are you guys seeing here? Controls, risk aversion. And I'll admit to you guys, this is the first time, at least, that I'm using Mentimeter, and it's kind of cool to see this little experiment happen live in front of us, right? You guys are submitting some responses. We're able to see those. It's kind of rejumbling things based off of kind of the biggest responses. What as we're looking at this live, Mark, Jim, what are some of the things that are kind of sticking out to you guys more immediately? You're on mute there, Mark.
See the annual budgetary cycles, annual funding cycle, project funding, inflexible budgets. Yep, absolutely.
And I was just giving a soliloquy on dependencies. I mean, I think that's one that, you know, the mute button is a dependency for me to be able to talk, but certainly our ability to track those dependencies and be able to see those, you know, not just within our teams, but, you know, all throughout the organization at all levels is super important. And then, you know, having that visibility to the financial side and what's happening from a labor budget perspective, because that is a big part of what we're delivering and how we deliver it.
Yeah, so good. Well, thank you guys all for joining in. I asked this question. You never really know what answers we're going to get, but we had an idea, right, of where this was going to go, and I think you guys are pointing out kind of that common challenge. If I could steal the screen back here, Julia, you're pointing out a common challenge that, you know, we want to address here today, is this idea of hybrid portfolios, right, and how hybrid portfolios have impact, you know, negative, positive, somewhere in between, right, impact on business agility, right? And when we say hybrid portfolios, we want to give a little bit of explanation of what we mean by that. And hybrid has been used in a lot of different contexts. Maybe one of the contexts that you guys are familiar with is this idea between, as organizations kind of work in their transformation, there's kind of a hybrid working models, right? You can be part of your organization might be in Waterfall or utilizing traditional project management processes as part of your execution model. Maybe other parts of your organizations are thinking about kind of trying this agile thing out, looking into iterative or incremental delivery. Right, that's an aspect of hybrid. Another aspect of this, and really kind of where we're going to be focusing in on, is this idea, and where you guys were pointing to, is this idea of project funding and that transformation or transition to value stream funding, right? As we think about project funding, I often think about I'm a PMP, admittedly a PMP. I served as a project manager for several years. And I think about all those time periods where, I got this new project and we kind of spam everyone, right? We put out this large email or whatever distribution to, different leaders throughout the organization. And we don't have a ton of details about this project yet. We just started it. We just kind of got getting things rolling. But we ask everybody at that point, what's your budget? Like, what do you think you're going to spend on this thing that we know basically nothing about, right? And you guys probably know how this story goes. At least this is how it happened in all the organizations that I was a project manager for. We asked that question and people would they were like, I don't know, but I know what's going to happen. They're going to take my number and they're going to slash it in half. So I'm going to double it or triple it or something, right? We're just kind of throwing numbers out there, but this is the reality of many organizations, this idea of project funding, right? Whereas we want to start to transition to, and where SAFE starts to think about, is how do we shift that to this concept of value stream funding, where we're funding the people, we're funding the arts, we're funding the where the value is being delivered, where we're thinking that the products, the solutions that we're building are intended to continuously deliver value to the customers, right? And as long as we're doing that, how do we fund those people, fund those Agile release streams in order for them to determine the priority, right? The best priority for their set of customers, right? So we really want to ask you guys, again, another poll question here in a second. Where is your organization, right? I think I have a feeling based off some of the responses that from the last poll, but I just want to, just test this out. Where is your organization? And specifically across these two different dimensions, are you, waterfall and project? You're kind of, right there at square one, right? Really response 3, if you will, if looking at this graph. Are you moving towards incremental delivery, but still within project funding? Where are you within this this model? And again, here I'm going to allow Julia. I'm going to stop sharing. Allow Julia to share some of the results as they're coming in live. But where is your organization? And again, you can just scan that QR code, or you can go to menti.com to use the code 16576488. Interested to see where people are at. And a decent amount, probably more than I expected, to be honest with you, in this pink area, or at least my wife says I'm colorblind sometimes, so I don't know if it's really pink, but I see it as pink. We got 21% as of right now who are in that value stream funding and incremental delivery. That's kind of like the ideal, if you will. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is the ideal and why we want to transition to that. A little more than I expected. Jim, Mark, any insights as we look at kind of the results of this survey?
Yeah, I'm actually impressed to see that many there. That's a good thing, and shortly we'll see why. But yeah, not surprised at the amount that are still in project funding model there, project and waterfall, project and incremental. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think if you combine incremental for the 60% there, I think that makes sense. We see, we see that a lot where people are are doing things in different ways. Nobody has one model or one way that they're doing certain things. So I think having that incremental view of that makes a lot of sense as well.
That's good. If I can steal back that share, Julia, I agree. I think the overarching trend that we saw there, almost 70% of the respondents were in kind of still in this project funding world. And that's where we really want to meet you guys where you're at, right? I understand that, 30% of you guys may be in that value stream funding. We're going to kind of focus in on that transition from project to value stream. And really, I want to hand this back over to Jim. Jim's done some really good research on the history of annual budgeting in business and kind of giving us, where did this idea of project funding come from, and what has happened between now and then to kind of allow us to kind of think about this a little differently. So, Jim.
Absolutely. We can get the slides back up there.
Oh, I need to. Am I sharing?
Yep.
All right. Looks like I might not be sharing. I'm going to try to reshare here.
There we
Everybody
go.
see my screen now? There we go.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So let's take a little walk through history. So saw that on the first Menti there, a lot of comments about traditional budgeting and project funding and things like that, making life difficult for us in the enterprise. And we all kind of recognize, that there are difficulties there. The question is why? Why do we have those difficulties, and kind of where did this whole concept of annual budgeting for organizations come about? So we see on our timeline here the real origins of the annual budgeting process is way back in the mid 1700s, around 1760. It actually began in England, where it was a way for Parliament to put constraints on the power of the king to levy taxes and frivolously spend the government's money on all kinds of lavish spending with new castles and just ornate decorations and just all sorts of stuff that the king was spending money on, that the government didn't have the money, but yet he was just spending on all these parties and everything, and then randomly levying taxes against the people to try and pay for it because they didn't have the money for it. And they said, hey, something's got to change. We can't just keep taxing the people and overburdening the people on this. So they came up with this concept of a budget. And really the budget, I forget the historical word, on my other deck where I have the details in there. I go into the origins of the word, but it really came down to, it was like a purse that they would hand the king that says, okay, inside this purse contains all the gold that you have to spend for the year. This is the money that we have right now. And you have to constrain your spending. Once this is gone, it's gone. We're not giving you any more. And before you can levy a new tax against the people, it needs to come through us. We need to have conversation, and we need to be reasonable about this and how that comes about. And it was relatively successful and ended up really pretty much every major government throughout the world now operates in that type of a model, where we have to be confined within the budget of the funding of which we have. Now, we see, some of the issues that we experience in our own governments here in the U.S. when we, don't balance the budget and have issues with that. But that was the origins of what that was for, saying, here's the funds that we need to stick within. So fast forward into around 1920, 1922, we have where J.O. McKinsey published his foundational book called Budgetary Control. That really goes into how can we take that concept of these annual budgets from a government perspective and apply that within business. And this really resonated with Brown and Sloan, who were Brown as the CFO within GM at the time, and Sloan the CEO. working together and saying, hey, this makes a whole lot of sense. Let's apply this in General Motors. And so they were the first to really apply these budgeting concepts that McKinsey published in business. And it worked. It worked really well. They were able to say, hey, we can't just keep spending money that we don't have. We need to understand how much do we have, what's our boundaries, stay within that. And Brown furthered that later on when he combined some of the research that he had done for DuPont historically on this new concept coming about called ROI, return on investment, not so new anymore. But he was able to do this ability to take this study on how do we calculate based off of looking into the future, looking at the past, how much do we believe that we're going to get a return on our investment that we make for our budgets, and be able to calculate that out. And so in 1924, he published a series of articles on ROI and how you can apply ROI within business, and it really started to grow from there and really took off in the business world. I mean, this was just enormously successful in the business world. Fast forward again to the 1960s and 70s when Marvin Bower, who was a student of McKinsey and really studied his concepts of budgeting, studied Brown's concepts of ROI, and really was able to bring this together and accelerate, and took over from McKinsey to be the successor of the McKinsey company. And they're consulting with other organizations and governments all around the world, being the leaders in implementing, these budgeting concepts within business. But when Marvin Bower took over, he started to recognize and realize that it's not working quite as well as it used to. When this really first started, and when he first started studying with McKinsey, they were able to be extremely predictable and really know what was going to happen in the future and accurately calculate ROI. But by the late 1970s, he realized that, hey, this is really hit or miss. And in fact, in 1976, in working with Congress, the U.S. Congress, on identifying the budget for the U.S., he made a statement to Congress where he said, to try to influence the future, you must forecast what it might be if you don't act. He said, yes, we understand that, concept of ROI and what we're going to do there. He said, but I must say, and you can check me 2 years from now, it isn't going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. The record of controlling the future is miserable. This was in 1976. He made this statement. So even there, he was recognizing this whole annual budgeting cycle, forecasting, ROI, we're miserable at it. It's not working very well. But he didn't quite put his finger on exactly why that is. So now we fast forward into the 1990s, up into the mid 2000s, and it really started to become more recognized by business at large that, hey, there's significant issues with annual budgeting. We're not sure exactly why. We're not sure why that is, but we're just not very good at this. And so some organizations doubled down on, well, we just have to be much better at ROI and put all kinds of investments in how do we calculate that better. But then there was this other group that started to recognize, hey, how do we move beyond budgeting? How do we start to move into this new age where that annual budgeting doesn't hinder us? What would that look like? What do we need to do? And so in 2003, Jeremy Hope and Robin Fraser published this foundational book through the Harvard Business School Press called Beyond Budgeting, where it really articulated how do we move away from annual budgeting into a more continuous prioritization method and not be hindered by budgets. So if we go to the next slide, then by 2009, then their work on this beyond budgeting really started to be recognized by mainstream business. And in 2009, the Business Finance magazine published this article announcing the death of budgets. Okay, so 1922 to 2009, you know, the budget, rest in peace on the budget there. And they went into, you know, kind of the history and the concepts, you know, that we just discussed. And they started to identify some of the areas where budgeting wasn't working, but they still didn't really narrow in on why exactly, what changed within the business world. So if we go to our next slide, then roughly around that same time, we have another book in the beyond budgeting kind of realm, published, called Implementing Beyond Budgeting. So giving guidance to organizations on how do we actually implement and move away from this budgeting process. And in there, Robert Kaplan, in the foreword to the book, made a statement in there. I'm not going to read this whole statement here. You can read through that. But essentially what he said is the recognition that, yeah, the budgeting process, it's an old relic. It doesn't work anymore in today's day and age. And he started to he started to get close to the reasoning for that. And in the last sentence there, he says, you know, the annual budget and its inflexibility in light of rapidly changing external circumstances and internal opportunities. He's starting to touch on why it doesn't work, what changed. So let's jump into that. Let's see what did change. Why is it so inflexible? What is it about business that doesn't work anymore? When we look at this chart that I have on the screen here, this graphic, many of you may recognize the 5 technological revolutions from Carlotta Perez's book on technological revolutions and financial capital. I've taken and overlaid this with a chart on the knowledge growth within the world, so the knowledge doubling curve. And when we look at this and we compare this to the timeline that we walked through, we see that when you look back at the 1760s, kind of that era when budgets first came about, it coincides also with that first kind of technological revolution, the Industrial Revolution there. And we see at that time in the world, the knowledge that was available to the world, the rate of which knowledge grows, was pretty stagnant. It was about every 100 years, we would get kind of a doubling of the knowledge within the world. So it was fairly slow in that knowledge growth. So at that time, it worked well to have these budgeting constraints on a yearly cycle because very little is going to change within that year. And you see, even within that technological revolution, while it was a great revolution for the time, the scope of the revolution was fairly narrow and specific. It was all around mobilization, railway and waterway kind of improvements and stuff like that, how to mobilize our products and mobilize people. We start to move forward then to the next revolution on the age of steam and railways, you know, in the mid 1800s there, again, fairly narrow in its focus. Our knowledge was still pretty stale at that point. You know, it's grown a little bit, but not that much. And so the focus on that revolution, again, fairly narrow, looking at, you know, how markets change a little bit, expanding beyond Europe into a more of a global market. Again, kind of around mobilization of the products, not so much product innovation in and of itself. But now we start to look at, you know, the 1920s there. Again, knowledge increased a little bit, but we're still at about that every 100-year rate for the knowledge growth. We jump forward to, you know, the mid 40s, 1940. Now we're seeing some significant change in the world. That knowledge growth has doubled. Instead of every 100 years, it's every 25 years. We're getting a large increase in knowledge, but it was still controllable. Budgeting, hey, we could still calculate some ROI, have those annual budgets because is still relatively small on the change of which we're facing within the market that we're facing. And also the knowledge that was available at that time was mostly available to the elites, right? Those who were in university, the high level elites in large organizations that were hired there for that. So it was fairly condensed in who had access to that knowledge. Jump forward now to, late 70s, early 80s, when Bauer made that statement about how miserable we are at forecasting the future. Well, we can see why. Wow, we went from knowledge doubling every 25 years to now knowledge doubling every 12 to 13 months. That's an enormous growth in knowledge. Not only was it starting to double within, access of universities and elites, but now we're starting to see knowledge be more available. We're starting to see the birth of the internet, the .com era, right? And having all that availability of the knowledge to the masses that wasn't available previously. And so now we see in that technological revolution, the age of software and digital, we see, hey, this is a massive change. So combining the age of oil and mass production and software and digital, we see the scope of what changed there. All of the different ideas, all of the different technology that was implemented in these revolutions has just exponentially grown in their focus. So it's no wonder that as a business, looking in today's day and age, we can see that in the 2020s, knowledge is doubling every 11 to 12 hours instead of 12 months, 12 hours. How in the world do we think in an era where on my cell phone, I can pick up my cell phone and I can have access to all the latest and greatest ideas, all the latest and greatest new technologies, and be able to see everything that's out there. My rate of demand as a consumer, because of my access to this knowledge and this enormous growth in knowledge, how in the world can we think that we can figure out and plan a year in advance all the projects that we're going to invest in and that we're going to fund, and think that we're actually going to be on track with that? So if we go ahead and go to the next slide, we see that this is the era of which we're in. All these new things, AI, ML, blockchain, 3D printing, augmented reality, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, advanced robotics. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We see the recognition now from the world that we are in this world of this new term VUCA, right? VUCA or VOCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That's the new normal. The knowledge is just growing way too fast. And we see on our next slide here a quote from Jeff Bezos, where he articulates that in today's era of volatility, there is no other way to be relevant, no other way but to reinvent. The only sustainable advantage that you can have over others is agility. That's it. Business agility, that's what he's talking about. As a business, being agile as a business, that's our only advantage to our competitors, because nothing else is sustainable. Everything else you create, somebody else will replicate. And I would say they're not just going to replicate, they're going to improve upon it, because they have more knowledge in their post release of whatever you did. They've gained more knowledge and they can make it even better. So it's that agility, the ability to respond to that market changes, that is our only advantage really in business today.
Love it. Thanks for that history, Jim. I think it's really cool to understand how we got to the point that we're at today, and really what has changed, right? What like you noted, budget wasn't evil when it first came out, right? It worked for a long time, right? But the world has changed in an ever increasing pace that we need to do something different, right? So we were able to kind of highlight the problem, or why we need to make this transition from budget or project funding to value stream funding. And I'm going to pass it over to my friend Mark here to really help us to think about, what's the solution to this, right? And I think what the answer in a lot of ways is what Mark's going to talk about, is this idea of labor financial management, and how the tool that Mark's going to show Apptio products from Apptio 1 and Target Process to really meet organizations where they are to show how we can see the project funding and help with that transition to maybe see that side by side with the value stream funding side. So Mark, take it over from here.
Yeah, great show. Thanks, and thanks, Jim, for that overview. I think it's really important to know kind of where how we got here to understand that there isn't a solution that's going to fix all of those problems. I get the easy button. I know the easy button does not exist, but there are help buttons that we can use. And when we look at when Apptio looks at these kind of challenges and what we look to do, there's a couple of key things. One, it's that focus on value. I mean, we hear more and more. How do we understand? What are we delivering? Are we on the right track in terms of those strategies? This is no surprises, but I say limit the surprises. There's always going to be something that comes up, and maybe we want good surprises instead of the negative surprises, and try to limit those. And then also try to reduce that pain. And that's part of that change that I think Joe and I were talking about earlier. Is there's going to be things that need to happen. There's going to be decisions that need to get made, and how do we look at reducing that with maybe some more visibility and easier ways to track and manage some of this detail. Okay. When we talk about labor financial management at Apptio, it's really about end-to-end alignment, being able to see from the financial side, and there's different roles that play in this, obviously. A strong financial team looking at things from a planning and a costing perspective, making sure that we're adhering to all the governance and the oversight that we need to do. That needs to tie into strategy, and sometimes there's a disconnect between the financial plans and the strategy that we're seeing from the delivery teams and the teams that are planning on actually building this. There are PowerPoints out there. There's ways to do that, but there's not a key disconnect. There's not a key connection sometimes between finance and strategy in terms of what the teams are building. And that plays down into delivery, where we look at being able to link work management back into financials through what your teams are delivering, through being able to show that from a resource perspective. And certainly labor is one of the bigger costs that we see and that we have in these delivery models. It's understanding where that is, and then being able to efficiently make those shifts if we need to make those shifts. So, labor financial management for us is really unifying that financial management component with work management and tying that all back in through strategy and delivery. Okay, and I think drilling just a little bit deeper into that. So three key things that we look at. It's labor budgeting and forecasting. So we still have some components of that. We're shifting that into value streams and arts and releases, and being able to transition those. But we still need to be able to budget for those and do a forecast on that. Realizing that labor and the value that they're delivering. I'm looking at different ways of tracking how we actually deliver that, whether that be cost per point models or other ways to track that actuals and the value that you're actually delivering on that, and realizing that value from a team perspective is something that we have different ways to track and manage and show that. And then a defensible labor allocation. So the finance team wants to know if we're planning all of this information, maybe it's not at the budget level, but maybe it's something along the lines of a release train, or we're looking at aligning this to our strategic themes and we're doing funding based on that. How do we go ahead and defense that, and how can we see those? And also we need to be able to still look at CapEx versus OpEx ratios and be able to track those details. So by combining the solutions in Apptio and Target Process together, and the integration that we have now that allows us to do that, it really gives us that full picture of resource management and our ability to track and see all of those details. So just one more slide. I'm going to just jump into a quick demo after this. But labor and budget forecasting was that first one. Do we have a clear and timely view of that? So there's the IT side of this and the finance side of that, and that's really where we see our Apptio 1 users and them looking at the details that they can see from a visual standpoint there. But then there's also the execution side of that, and the product owners and the teams that are actually trying to build that, and aligning those two things together is something that I'm going to jump into now and kind of show you just a couple examples here in a few minutes to kind of give you a real live example of what we can do when we try to bring all of those things together in that unified labor financial management and give you that end-to-end view. So make sense so far, Joe? Good.
Yeah, and this is gonna be my favorite part. Like, this is where you get to again kind of meet you where you guys are, show you guys truly how we have worked with different organizations to meet them where they are, understanding where their project funding is, and mirror that right up against where we want to start to think about from a value stream funding and help with that transition. So yeah, I'm excited to see. I've already seen it, but I'm still excited to see it again, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where we are right now is in our Apptio dashboard. So we're looking at a specific view that might be looked at from a labor leadership perspective, an IT finance lens, or a view of this. And we're looking at value realization and the cost for specific portfolios, as they align to both internal costs, labor costs, and other things. So we can get a full picture of what those costs are and how those work. But we're also tying those back to the strategy. So in target process, we're going to set up objectives and key results, and we're able to track that labor cost, not just by portfolio or by value streams, but really down into the specific objectives, OKRs that we're going to go ahead and track. So when I zoom into one of these OKRs, this one is for growth, we can actually track that down into the strategic plans or the goals that we have for the organization, and these are going to tie down into what we're going to set up inside of target process. So the key results that we're tracking to, and then the work that we're tracking to for each of these strategic objectives can tie back down into specific key results, and then we can actually see the cost and how they tie back in. So this is just one view of how we align strategy from the OKR perspective, and be able to roll that all the way up here into a view that the finance team can actually see, and then we'll align the work and the details underneath each one of those. Okay. The next section is really tying it back into the budget and being able to see kind of from a cost perspective as we look at those value streams, kind of where are we from our overall costs, where are we based on our budget, and what do we need to do in terms of maybe making specific changes. So if I look at my headcount view over here and we look at the details about how many people do we currently have, how many people are we expecting, do we think we're planning to have, whether that be because we're making changes, we're adding people, or we need to remove people. What is that going to do? This is at a portfolio view here. It can also be at a value stream view. What does that mean when we need to reduce headcount, or when we need to increase, or we think we need to increase headcount because maybe something like AI is going to force us to bring in more people. We need to hire, another team or another 60 people to go ahead and bring those in. So this gives us that view of what's happening here, and then what we've done within target process is be able to then plan out at that portfolio level, the project level, how are we going to actually fulfill those, and what does that look like, and how does that synchronize back between what the finance team is going to see here to the actual execution. Okay. So this is that finance view. This is what the finance teams would see. What the organization would see when you're doing the planning is when I jump over here into target process, we have an intake process, which lets us to start to really understand what that is. This is showing me a specific view of a request. We're viewing the lean charter, and we're setting a high-level view for my business value and my scoring for that. I can change the different values that I see in here, but while we're under review, we want to go ahead and set the different business values so we can understand what this score might be. And this is going to tie back to the objectives and key results that we just looked at over on the finance side, but it's also going to tie into the labor and the resources that we're going to need. So I can look at the allocations of the type of work that we think we're going to need from a team perspective, a user perspective, or a train perspective. And what we do is we set specific allocations of that work, and then the solution will tell us whether or not we're overloaded on those things or not. So based on the type of work that we need, based on the lean chart that we're seeing, we can make a call of whether this is going to be Agile work. So we can see the delivery type here of Agile on the right-hand side, or if it's going to be a waterfall project or a waterfall work that we think we're going to do, we can make it waterfall work. And we can also use automation to decide what that's going to be. And based on the type of request and the intake that's coming in, we can make the decision here to either create an initiative or a portfolio epic off of that, or we can come in and we can make a waterfall project off of that as well. So we can decide based on the incoming requests and the scoring and what we're looking at from a governance here, what do we want to do with that work? And then we can actually start to tie that down into the labor and the individuals that we think we need on these. Okay, so we've got the request, we'll generate the work off of that, and then we'll be able to go into and see things like a consolidated roadmap. So in here, I've actually generated my initiatives, tying these in on a consolidated roadmap, so I can see my initiatives with my waterfall projects all in one place. It allows me to plan them together. We can see them individually, or we can use other things like the statuses on this roadmap to track them, track how many dependencies do we have across that work, and then really drill into the actual labor and the work that we think we need to plan on this different type of work. So this gives me a view into creating different types of initiative and projects, seeing them all on a portfolio roadmap where I can see my initiatives and projects together. Okay. Now, from a resource perspective, we looked at those work allocations earlier. In here, what I'm looking at in this view is the things that we have planned from a work perspective on the initiatives. And we look at work allocations to be able to show me those, as well as on the right-hand side here, the items that we have, the work allocations we have for specific projects. So we can see across the two in one consolidated view, where do we have issues? The purple items here are showing me where we're overloaded, or we may have specific issues for the different teams that we've planned. So I can add additional work into here, or we can align work in. I can drag and drop and move these around if we want to go ahead and do a specific plan. But once we set that plan, that's what we'll go ahead and set back up into our financials. So we can say, these are the allocations that we've decided to do for this specific work. We can go through a governance process for these allocations for this labor. And then from that point, we can decide if we need to move forward or not. This is one view, but I want to see a better view where I can actually track and see where we have teams that might be overloaded or based on those work allocations. So this view here is a view that shows each team, and we can drill into the teams that might be overloaded for specific work. So I can just drill into the ones where we've got an overload here. And if I look at something like Team Flash Crashers, they're at 125% for the second half of the year. So I can use target process to go ahead and look at what do we have planned for them already, which features have we planned, and then we can drill further into that and track, and maybe make adjustments to that specific plan. So again, this is those allocations that we've set for that team. When we go into the details for that team, we can actually see what do they currently have in their plan backlog, what have they started, what are they working on. We can track different items in here that maybe have dependencies or blockers associated to them. And for this team, for Flash Crashers, this is showing me that we have some work here that is a blocker between some other work. So maybe we can make adjustments here at the PMO level or the team level to help us to alleviate some of the needs that we have for that team. Or maybe we need to make adjustments to what we've actually planned for that team. So I can go into the rostering view of that team. This is the roster for Team Flash Crashers. We can see the roles that we have on the team. We can adjust those roles, or if we know that we need to add headcount here, or we need to maybe reduce headcount, we can actually move these team members around and make adjustments to that team. But then I also want to tie that back to the work allocation. So when I go into my team, in here, we can see those work allocations one more time. We can see where we have overloaded items, so we can track those. And maybe we can have a discussion of either to shift this work or this detail to another team, maybe to another release train, or I can actually shift that out here, and then we can make sure that we don't have any overloads for that work. So we can maybe move some of this out to the second half of the year. And now we know that the team at least has a plan that we can then lock down and then send that back up into our financials to be able to track that. Okay, so we started at the initiative level. We broke that work down here to the team level. Those teams then can start to execute on that work. And as they're executing on that, we'll finish up by going back up into my financials. So once we've made all the decisions here in target process, we've moved the teams around, we've adjusted the work, we can come back up into our leadership review view here and track these in different ways as well. So we can go into labor allocations, and we can actually see those updated labor allocations in here to see both from a completed work perspective and what we've committed to here, to that actual work allocations for those different items that we just saw and that we made changes to within Flash Crashers. The automation that we have will send up those allocations and the costs associated to those back into here. So as we're tracking things like how well are we doing from a team perspective, both in seeing kind of the statuses and the views of those, we can go into, we can actually see the load and the velocity and what we're doing across those different teams and track our allocations for that work. So, the finance team now has visibility into the allocations. They have visibility into the type of work that it is, whether it be CapEx or OpEx. And now as the teams complete that work, we can roll the value back up into here and be able to show that within one consolidated view for both the finance teams here in a finance view, as well as for the execution teams that are tracking that. So I'll finish just by going into value realization one more time and showing us that we can track our overall costs. We can track the labor as well as the revenue and the value that we're delivering across those. We can see that by our portfolios. We can see that by the strategic objectives and the themes that we're tracking to, as well as the specific value streams as well. Okay, so by combining both the finance side of this with the labor planning and execution side of this, we can actually roll all of that up and have a consolidated, unified view for both the finance and the labor teams. So that was the demo part of that. I'll stop sharing and give you back the ball there.
No, I love it. Thanks, Mark, for sharing that demo. And I know Mark just walked through a ton of information. We have a limited time in these types of webinars. If you're interested in kind of getting a longer deep dive into this, we'd be happy to set that up. I think we're going to have some share some contact information here in a little bit where you guys can get in touch with us. But what I love about what Mark shared there is and kind of links back to the title of this talk, right? We're hoping to meet organizations exactly where you are, right? Many of you guys, most of your organizations are in project funding today, right? But we want to provide transparency on that funding, right? To help make the shift as part of moving towards value stream, right? What the last two views that Mark showed were both the project view as well as that value stream view. And oftentimes when we're working with organizations, as we show them those two views, we see a lot of volatility, as we've talked about, what Jim talked about a little bit earlier, that volatility in the project view, because we're trying to predict the future in this VUCA world that we live in, right? But as we shift to that value stream view, right, what we start to see is some consistency, because the people who are doing the work in many organizations are oftentimes the biggest piece of our budget, the biggest funding aspect that we have. So we are able to see some consistency there. So we're able to help to show finance and get other organizational leaders on the same page around how we can truly make this transition, this transformation possible, while keeping the guardrails up for utilizing our organizational dollars in the best way. Right? So with that, I'm going to share maybe one last screen. I think it's just some. We actually, do we have time for Q&A? We're a little bit out of time. Julia, do we have questions here for Q&A?
See, we have about 2 minutes left. No questions yet.
I see that my friend Etienne from Digital Tangos here, he's provided some clarifications. He gave us the origination of our word budget comes from an old French word. I'm not going to try to pronounce it in French because I don't speak French, but it means little bag, right? So kind of talking to what Jim was talking about, the bag, the purse that we have of coins. And Etienne, you also kind of identified here this idea of knowledge doubling every 11 to 12 hours. Perhaps that's information that's doubling. How do we convert this idea of information to knowledge? I think these are really great points here. Etienne, I appreciate you sharing there. Well, if there's no other questions, I actually see one coming in here now. I'll take this one here and then we'll maybe shift to the end. This is from David. Was this both target process and Apptio 1 in the demo portion of the call? How much can target process do by itself of what we saw today?
Yeah, David. So we did show a mix of both target process and Apptio 1. I mean, target process as a standalone solution can process and do all of this as well. So we've got the ability for us to do objectives and key results all the way down to the execution level and integrations with the team tools. The Apptio 1 component really allows the finance teams and the details, if you're using something like other detailed costing or other ways to bring that data in as well into a solution. So there's options there.
Well, with that, we are out of time. I thank you guys for that. If you guys do have any other questions or want to talk with us in a little bit more detail, you guys can reach out to any one of us here. Our information here is on the screen. And then I want to just leave it up to Russ to maybe close us out. He's our VP of Business Development. Anything else that you want to share here, Russ, as we close out?
Nothing else to share, just, thanks to Mark and Jim and Joe and Julia for your work in putting this together. Thanks to all the participants and attendees, and stay tuned for more webinars from Agile Rising. Have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.